speaking of politics, I did want to circle back on that when I said politics associated with open source projects and how developers have to have a political acumen. And it was really, I was thinking of politics and stating politics more in the purest form of the term, in the sense that politics is compromise, right? You've got lots of folks who are trying to do different things in the same open source code base. And it's common that you'll find two different similar ideas that kind of conflict with one another. And the people in the project that can bring both of those sides together and get to the point where they understand each other's what they're ultimately trying to go for. So have empathy in what each is trying to achieve and define that area of compromise. How would we refactor this to be able to handle both types of situations? Or, how can we compromise? It's when I talk about politics and political acumen that developers need to be able to help communities get through those kind of topics, because open source ultimately is compromise. Right? Everybody's trying to do something. It's helpful to have it in a collaborative, but it also means that there has to be compromise. And those developers that have the technical acumen to be able to help find those solutions, and the communication skills, and that political acumen to be able to get those sides talking and agreeing, that's a skill set that's very soft, but very, very important, particularly in open source. It's helpful in your career overall to be able to communicate that way as a developer. But it's really notable when you're doing it, like I said, with different cultures from different companies who have different agendas, right? It's a skill.
Yeah, if you really think about it, it's very much an act of kind of juggling where I guess it stands on both sides of the spectrum, the responsibility of the people who are contributing, and then also the maintainers of the project as to where the project kind of ends up going. And then, like you mentioned, some people want the project to ultimately end up, say, using this particular language or a tool, etc. And then maybe down the line that closes the possibility for other stuff. So then they create like a separate either branch, or they permanently branch off a piece of that repository and then kind of take the other direction. All the projects have a different approach to it. And I saw that even with the handful of projects that I took a look of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, and I'll give a couple examples of Linux again, because as you can tell, I love Linux. But one is, there was a time, like somewhere between 2009 and 2011 or 12, I can't really remember where. But the people who were doing small footprint Linux, so putting them into small devices, they had a set of requirements around battery life, around small memory footprint, all of those kind of things, really fast boot. They had a set of requirements that were very different than the big server guys like HP and IBM and so forth, because we were putting stuff on big iron, Superdome, mainframe class machines. We needed big memory. We needed symmetrical multiprocessing. We were doing 64 bits. We had all of these issues with big hardware. And so the requirements were very different. And there was a time when Linus actually considered splitting the Linux kernel and going two different directions and having two different versions. And in the end, he said, no, let's try to keep it together. And if you think about it, when Android and the ARM processor moved from 32-bit to 64-bit. But that was a big deal. I mean, it used to take forever for software to catch up to hardware changes like that. And when it went to multi-core, when ARM went to multi-core in your phone, that too would have taken forever. But because it had already been on Linux in supercomputers, it happened overnight. And similarly, all of those things about being able to go with different P states in the CPU, so that you could make the processor go to sleep when it wasn't that busy, that actually saved on both heat and on electricity, right? And now those are features commonly used in supercomputers, right? So the things that the small footprint and the phone folks wanted ended up being really helpful to the large scale guys, and vice versa. right? And that would not have happened if they had split the code base. So keeping that together politically, keeping that together as a very large community with very diverse interests, that's an example of how, being able to have that kind of recognition and compromise skills. And it's a lot of refactoring, right? It's like, no, okay, we got to break this thing apart again so that we can modularize it better so that these guys can do what they want to do and those guys can do what they want to do. It's that kind of, and that kind of technical debt inside of a company, that doesn't happen, right? You make technical compromises to get to time to market. It's another reason why I think open source is a method of developing code works, because there's always the rest of the community that you can't convince to take that shortcut, because it doesn't help them and it just clutters up the code. And so paying that technical debt is harder. It's or making the withdrawal and gaining that technical debt is harder to do, because others in the community will go, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. That's going to be expensive down the road. So more of that compromise that helps the quality of the code. These are all the counterintuitive things that, like I said, I love about open source.